Welcome back to Everything HR's new segment, Becca's Breakdown, where we cover some of the most important topics our guests have brought up during the Culinary Conversations. The goal of the Culinary Conversations is to speak with leaders in the restaurant world to discuss the hardships and successes they've overcome in growing their businesses. Today, we're discussing the top lessons learned from Craig Dunaway and Chris Nevins. Becca, happy to have you back in the studio.
Man, it's been a minute. Like, we've been so occupied with taking care of everyone else. We had to sideline our own little podcast that we've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been really, really unique and interesting as far as the conversations that I've had during the Culinary Conversations. It's nice to have this where we can kind of take a second, cover some of the topics that we've discussed previously, and then really dive in a little bit deeper into them.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's do it. What do we got going on? I asked you to keep it a secret from me until we just started talking.
Yep. So we're going right in. All right. So first off, we're going to cover the first Culinary Conversations episode, which was with Craig Dunaway, COO of Penn Station East Coast Subs. With 320 locations in 14 states, they are earning $415 million annually. And one of the big topics that we discussed was quality control. And, I mean, you've worked at McDonald's before, so you definitely understand just how important quality control is. You want every single guest, when they come in, to have the same exact experience.
Yep. We always put on an exemplary service. This was my location anyway. The staff that I've worked at 4 different McDonald's locations, five on holiday seasons, but way back when I did, we had some of the best staff in our area. And if you weren't, you just weren't on the staff. We didn't tolerate the slackers or the ones who would treat the guests poorly. If you're just throwing together a sandwich instead of actually putting it together with the care that you need to, you just weren't on the team. I'm fully aware that there are a multitude of McDonald's that don't act the same way. There are some that you're just like, how do you even have a job? But yes, absolutely. The quality that has to go in for customer satisfaction. We treated it with utmost respect. And another reason as to why was not just that we cared about our jobs and the customers, but we aimed to ace our, what do they call it? I forget what they call it. The mystery shoppers.
Oh, okay.
They would make or break us. So the mystery shoppers would come through, and we got hip to them for a little bit. They always ordered not a Chick-fil-A. I'm sorry, the other fish fillet. Sorry, the fish fillet meal. But they would slightly change it, like light on the tartar sauce or a full slice of cheese, because you only get half a slice of cheese. It's not a ripoff. It's just a balance in ingredients. But they would change it just slightly. So we were like, oh, that's them. And then they realized that we got hip to them because we always put on our best, like even more when they were there. So then they started changing when they came and what they would order. And we tripped up. There was one night that we were just having a horrible night, overwhelmed, and we were just slapping together sandwiches and other products, and we failed our mystery shop because we just did not perform to 100%. So it's not just McDonald's, it's the restaurant industry across the board. And for those that they're just like, I don't really care, you're not going to succeed with that type of attitude. McDonald's has been in the business for so long because of that care, because they do not accept mediocrity. So I know, like, some people will get a little discouraged when it comes to supporting, big corporate. But I have to respect those larger chains that have really made it. Because where did McDonald's start? A shack. And it was very competitive, but that's how they started, and then they made it big. They're worldwide.
Absolutely. And I think that just the topic of quality control alone, we can really, really dive in deep because there's so many layers to it. Like, one, you have obviously the food quality. Like, how good
Mhm.
is the food? What's the experience the customer is getting when it comes to just the food itself? So with that, you have what SOPs are you creating? The standard operating procedures. Are you following a specific recipe? I mean, even something as simple as like, is the recipe and the ketchup changing? Or is the way that you're stacking the meat changing? Or the way that you're cooking? Or how long it's in the oven? Like, all of that really dials into what the quality is going to look like over time. And then you have the service side, because that's also a level of quality that you need to keep. How are you greeting your customers? How good is your cashiers or your servers or, everyone at actually engaging with the customers and having that conversation? So when it comes to quality control, mystery shoppers, great way. Like, it's a great way, super easy to do. When I was working at Domino's franchise, they did the same thing. It was they would send a person, although for us though, it wasn't a mystery. Like, they were very clearly dressed in Domino's attire.
Yeah.
They would go into the back, they would check our cold, they would test our food product, like they would go through and do absolutely everything. Um Even like walking around the outside, like they would look at our dumpsters behind our store, and if there was trash overflowing or trash on the floor, we'd get marked on that.
Well, that's QA. So there's separate divisions in McDonald's where you have QA, which are the openly noticeable corporate staff. Even in franchise, you still have corporate come down and they send their people to do a walkthrough just like yours. But then you also have mystery shoppers at McDonald's that they are from corporate, but um they don't come dressed as McDonald's staff.
Mm.
And you never get the same person, um, or you hardly get the same person, I should say, and which makes it more difficult to identify them, their faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you get used to their orders, but you don't get used to their faces. So that's what was the difficult part. And when they would do the QA, like you were mentioning, walking through the store and walking around, um, you would get dinged on some of the things that you're just like, I would have never thought. Like one of them, he went into the drop down tile just to check. And he was like, it's too dusty.
That's hilarious.
And we got marked on that. And I was like, oh, how would we know? Like, and apparently that was up to the maintenance crew that was like hardly ever there to take care of. Or there was he said that the dumpsters, the doors to open up to the dumpsters, they weren't locked. So he got marked on that. Because you have to keep them locked or customers would so petty. They would go into the dumpsters, grab a sandwich, bring it inside, and complain about how disgusting it was
That's hilarious.
to get a free sandwich.
Yeah, yeah.
Like how dedicated are you on that?
Yeah, they want it. They want it bad.
But yeah, QA takes their jobs very seriously, and I understand why, because you have to keep your facilities clean for one, and fully operating with the highest of food safety possible, and keeping like even though it was the push and tile for the ceiling, keeping that dust to a minimum or none is important because it does fall onto the food.
Absolutely. I think QA is really interesting, specifically because it's really hard if you're the manager, you're the owner, you're the CEO, you're whatever, but you're in it and you're actually working and you're running through it. It's really hard to nitpick every small thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that QA is a very necessary thing. And I think another really important part about QA is that they can be completely objective because they don't care about your team. Like they don't care if your team is going to like them. They don't care if you are going to, be happy with them. Like they're just there to get the facts, tell it to you straight, and then move on to the next store.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that objectivity is really, really critical. And getting an objective view of your store. When you're in it every day, you see the same things. You see the same messes, you see the same people. Yep. So it's really easy to just kind of fall into this rut and this routine.
You become complacent.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think that QA does a great job of kind of just moving the cobwebs and really seeing what exactly is going on.
Well, that's what makes them so good at their job, because the thing is with the QA is they do not have to report back in to do a shift at a store. in the sense of they don't have to make the food.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what keeps them so fresh, because they're not going to be exhausted from doing the same thing every day on repeat. Instead, they have to visit multiple stores to make sure that every store is being held accountable. And every time that they visit multiple stores, it's always something.
Yeah.
It's always something different that they have to market. It's always like, oh my gosh. Because like I'm sure that they've seen some ish, you know?
Yep.
So QA has those fresh eyes that we tend to dull. And even when I worked with you at Domino's, there were some things that even when I walked in, I was like, this is a no-no. This is a big no-no. Like for the fact that most of the workers weren't even wearing the non-slip shoes.
Mm.
Like that is heavy OSHA violation for one. And then you tend to track more crud throughout the stores because the non-slip shoes have different types of tread.
Mm.
So it's a mix of things that a lot of people don't realize and they just brush it off. But yeah, I totally agree. There was, leaving food out or ignoring expiration dates on sauces too. A lot of people tend to ignore expiration dates on sauces because they figure, hey, it's got a good shelf life. But those expiration dates aren't a suggestion. It's because in certain ingredients in the mix do curdle. So you have to toss it. It will change the flavor. It will change the safety. I'm sure that there are probably some red pepper flakes still sitting on the shelf from a long time ago. Like these things get ignored. Salt in McDonald's, it has an expiration date. I would have never known because we never have salt that long. But I remember when working there, I had noticed it for the first time, and I was just like, I didn't know salt expired. It's one of those natural minerals that I would have never, but my manager broke it down for me, and it made a lot of sense when she did.
Yeah, I think that really does tie into the next part that Craig discussed, which was developing those standard operating procedures. And I think that the thing that he did really, really well in describing when it came to it is you have to live it first. So whenever you're at a single store, individually owned, kind of before you move into the franchise section or before you want to open more locations, it's really understanding what exactly is working and then what's not working and then fixing it.
Yes.
So one big way is creating your operating procedures. And with that, it's, how exactly are you cooking? What is your, how are you pulling your ingredients in and moving them out?
Mm-hmm.
Like all of that needs to be actually written down. So that way there's never a question on what should I do? What's the right thing to do? The more questions that your employees have, the worse that they're going to do because they're just going to guess.
Yep.
And you do not want them guessing because sometimes they'll guess right, but a lot of times they're going to guess wrong.
Yep.
So creating those standard operating procedures in the first store is extremely, extremely important. And when it comes to that, it really dials down to absolutely everything. Every single time that someone comes in, how do they get greeted? What is the intro when you speak to them? What is the way that you engage with them, take the food, almost like a script, really? Like you have to create that script dynamic with every single part of it. How often are you cleaning? Like when are they creating the schedule? When are they posting the schedule? Are they having team meetings? When are they having team meetings?
Mm-hmm.
All of that has to have standard operating procedures because once you add an extra store, you increase the level of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And that increase of complexity, that's what ruins restaurants. That's where people are like, oh, yeah, this is obviously a chain. And they think that because it's not as high quality as if you see a single store, like the family values, the care that they add into it. But I love when I go into a restaurant and I'm like, wow, this place is so cool. And then I'm like, oh, they have like 30 locations. And I thought this was the only store because of how good they did.
Yes.
Like that is actually a thing that I see and I value. Like, oh, I spoke to them and they greeted me. I had the food and that was like positive. That is exactly what I'm looking for when I go to a restaurant. It's an experience.
I find it very impressive when stores that have multiple locations do have excellent service across the board. And I think a lot of people are just like, well, that's supposed to be how it is. Yes. However, when you're not familiar with working in a food industry, let alone transitioning between multiple of them, you never really understand how easy it is for things to slip through the cracks. And I'm talking about not just like the minor things of someone's supposed to be taking a break. No, I'm talking about from the major issues of maybe you have multiple minors throughout every restaurant you have, not only not taking breaks, but they're doing overtime. That is illegal. But when you have so many locations that you're not staying on top of, it's easy to fall through the cracks. When you have uh multiple locations and your food is subpar at best, it's going to be easy for customers to rank up a multitude of negative reviews, and now your brand has diminished. So when you have a restaurant that has a slew of locations and they're doing phenomenally, that's an achievement met, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And the understanding for people that they just don't get it. And like you said, you have to be in it to understand it.
Yeah.
Like the McDonald's I worked at, the franchise, um, our owner was from Venezuela and he resided in Venezuela most of the year. So there was a lot that he wasn't aware of. So then he started sending his sons to work in our locations. And they started seeing what we needed, and we started seeing improvements left and right because they were giving him feedback. They were letting him know the workers aren't just exaggerating. This needs to be taken care of. So quickly, we ended up getting improvements, not just on the employee side, but also on the customer side. And the customers were seeing those improvements. So it's very interesting to see when owners take that step to listen and actually follow through with filling those gaps and making sure that their chains are doing better so that way everybody can succeed and not just the ones in the spotlight.
Mhm.
So I find that very good. But yet compliance, I think compliance is what hurts the most. And people will probably argue that most likely it's food, the quality of food. It's usually compliance that hurts the most when you have a multitude of chains. Like, you remember one of our favorite pizza joints that had a second location, they shut that second location down
Yeah.
because they were doing so poorly at the second one that they were like, no, you're bringing the name down. Then nobody wants to come to our restaurant.
Yep.
So it was a strategic decision until they either decide to do it again or not. I don't know where they went after shutting down the second location, but it's some people can open multiple, some can't. It just depends on what you have equipped.
Yeah. I mean, I do and don't agree with that as far as some people can open multiple locations and some people can't. It really comes down to the processes. Like it really comes down to how effective of a process did you create? Because if you create a go by and people have exactly what they need from when the first person is supposed to walk in, a list of everything they're supposed to do to make sure that you have a great day, and then all the prep that needs to be done, if you have a driver, when the driver has to get there, what prep they have to do, what time your team has to get there, like all of that makes it so that way you don't fail. Like, and then it comes down to more of the people side, which is really just accountability and recruiting. So that's kind of a separate subject. I think that any restaurant can open multiple stores because if one person can do it, everyone else can do it. It just comes down to skills. So the skill here being how complex is this going to be? Can you simplify it? Can you make sure that they have no questions? They know exactly what they have to do 24/7. Like they know I show up at 8 a.m. I do all my prep for 1 hour. Then we open our doors and then we start with that. I know that 15 minutes into the first shift, my second person is coming in because that's when we start getting our first breakfast hit. And then I know that after the first breakfast hit, there's a lull. So then we decrease our labor hours. And then after that, we increase for lunch. And then we decrease. Maybe we even close between lunch and dinner so that way our team can have a full rest time. And then dinner, we reopen. Like that is just systems.
That's your SOP.
Yeah, that's all it is.
This place had it. Now that I think about it, just looking as a customer, because I was never a worker there. But I don't know if they had SOPs because it was family driven, the first location, and the second one started outsourcing. But yeah, I don't think they did.
And that's what it is. It's always I like the family idea. Like I like that we're we're a family business. It's been in the business for a long time. The problem is that family businesses by itself can't scale. And the reason, this is not a jab at family businesses. The reason is because how many family members do you have?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Unless eventually
you breed like rabbits and everybody wants to work for it, it's not going to succeed.
Exactly. You need that accountability. You need the recruiting. You need to understand payroll. There's a lot more that goes into it. But as far as just the operations, understand what it takes to have a successful business. And that starts at the first location. Mm-hmm. What are the routines that you're finding yourself doing? Write that down. That specific routine, that's what you're writing down.
I mean, in modern day, you can just Google it. Standard operating procedures for restaurants. And if you want to get nitty gritty, just add more to the search. For standard operating procedures for a small scale restaurants, and you just go from there. And people are going to hate on this. ChatGPT, run it. Just ask ChatGPT. I need you to run me a standard operating procedure for a small pizza joint that serves about 30 customers a day. You'd be surprised how much detail that this engine can run.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I certainly think that you have to be specific with your restaurant because the location matters, the type of food that you make matters.
Don't just copy and paste it. You still have to make edits.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to make sure that's very clear. Yeah, but that's actually a great idea as far as getting an outline. Yeah. Because sometimes it's really hard to just know where to start.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of people don't know where their starting ground is.
Yeah.
And then they have a weak foundation because they try to just wing it. Mm-hmm. And it falls. It falls apart.
Absolutely. So the next part that Craig brought up, and like I said, we're only going to touch on 3 lessons that Craig gave us, but honestly, his podcast is chock full of it. He's the COO of Penn Station, and they're doing really well right now. So definitely check out that podcast to get a little bit more knowledge on it. But the third one that I found really, really interesting that he hit on a few times was that restaurants are a penny's business. Mm-hmm. And I think that is such a powerful framework because it's really understanding where it is that you're making money at. Did you know that 80% of restaurants fail after 5 years?
I learned it while watching The Bear.
That is a crazy
I had to Google
statistic.
It to fact check them. But yeah, that's sad. That's really sad because you see some of your favorite mom and pops or even some of your chains and they don't survive. And it's sad. Because you're man, you work so hard. And you would think that your legacy would continue. And I know they say all good things come to an end. But you don't want it to, right? Especially when they're doing great, you're just keep going.
Yeah.
What's stopping you? Why are you failing? Stop it before you fail.
Well, one big thing is money. Completely honest, money is huge. And when it comes to the inventory, the labor, your supply chain management, understanding the payroll, all of your recruiting, there's a lot that goes into it. And if you're not skilled in every facet, which most people are not, to be fair, no one, not no one, but very few people are an expert in every single part.
Yep. You know, what's funny is that I've known what you've been going for with Omni, right? With the restaurant serving industry and whatnot. And every time that you do a podcast with a guest, I learn a lot. I learn a little bit more here and there. But I've learned the most from watching The Bear. And
That's
I know
hilarious.
that's like drama packed, but by watching all of their struggles and finding out what goes on with trying to get a restaurant, just getting it running, because they were technically running,
Hmm.
but it was garbage. So he went in, he's doing all the fixes, but it was a lot of work. It was essentially a money pit. And seeing that, it helped. It helped me understand it even more, because working at McDonald's, it's already going. It's already
Yeah.
succeeding. It's there. Domino's, same thing. Watching the podcasts of all these different restaurant people with, their different hats, I'm like, they already have it going. Seeing the Bear have to tear apart something that's already functional, or I should say dysfunctional, and making it functional with the ins and outs and the troubles that come with it, it helped me understand even more.
Mm.
And it's like, I thought having a house was hard, a 50-year-old house, but having a house that you have to serve people out of, that's it is difficult. It's not impossible though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not impossible. He slowly developed his SOPs. He followed through with advice that he had gotten from previous managers, bosses around the world, stuff like that. But um, I don't think people really understand what it takes. It's
No.
not just some squared box that people can be like, "Hey, come buy my food." There's a lot of legality behind it, for one, and safety and food, just the food sourcing. Oh my gosh. It's expensive and difficult the more fancy you get.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's there's quality and quantity when it comes to the food, so for sure. But you're absolutely right. Like, because one thing is that when it comes to McDonald's, Domino's, all of these larger organizations, they have profit sharing essentially. Like,
Hmm.
if one store is not doing very well, but they have 30 other stores that are doing well, then that one store doesn't hurt them as much. So they kind of share the debt there. As opposed to if you have one location, that is it. Like you're
Yep,
either making or breaking with that one location.
that's right.
And then some people, they think that, oh, well, because that's the case, maybe my location is just bad. I'll just open another one, even though the first one isn't very good yet. And that just causes even more issues.
Yeah.
So I do like that you brought up, because that's very true. If you're not in the restaurant industry, like, and not a franchise or a chain, but an independently owned restaurant of someone who's trying to build the foundation and then potentially scale, you don't understand what that looks like.
Hmm.
I've never worked in a fine dining establishment, so I don't necessarily understand all the comprehensive situations that they have to go through, the specific skills that they have to have, the culture that they have developed over the years to make them succeed more. Now, having multiple conversations with top restaurants and things like that, I've gained much more of an understanding. And I think that has actually helped my business acumen when it comes to supporting them with HR, payroll, recruiting, and things like that, because I know the skills that they're specifically looking for. But it's very similar to, if you've never seen it, you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that pennies business mindset, everything costs money. Absolutely everything. From that 15-minute labor hour, like, if you have 5 people in the morning when you know that you're slow, you're just wasting money, like
Yes.
burning it.
And I don't think employees, looking at employees specifically, not customers, I don't think they understand when managers harp on them about wasting time. They don't fully process that.
Yep.
Like the sense of the what is the saying? If you can lean, you can clean.
Yep.
Essentially, what that means is that I need to see you busy while you were clocked in. If you're not going to be busy, clock out. And mm, I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't understand it till I became
Hmm.
a manager at McDonald's. And it would drive me nuts because then I had to pay attention to labor. It would drive me nuts just seeing them just slack off. And
Yep.
I'm like, we have a ridiculous amount of dishes. We have a rush coming. The grease traps are filled. The sauces aren't stocked. Don't wait until we get slammed to try and fill our stuff. Go take care of it now. The lobby's a mess. Like, there's so much that can be done, and you're just sitting here on the clock. I made people clock out, and if they caught attitude, I'm like, you can go. I'm not tolerating that.
Yeah.
And I completely understand now why businesses have that mindset. Everything counts against them. So they have to make sure that they have a good enough return to properly support everything. So when you have someone just chilling on the back texting, you can go. You obviously don't need to be working right now.
And that's a problem that all businesses have. I think traditional businesses, they have formulated their SOPs in a way that accountability is just a very clear part of the job. When I think when it comes to restaurants, it's not as a strong foundation. And that accountability is such an important piece, just like when it comes to labor, that viewing everything in 15-minute increments. And that's how you structure your labor hours. And then even when it comes to food, like that
Product
accountability
waste.
of, like, what's your product looking like? Those product costs will kill you if you're not on it. And
Yep.
it has to be all the time. One of the examples that Craig brought up was, if we're supposed to give like one ketchup packet per fries, and you give one ketchup packet for a medium fries, and then the next person you give 3 to, and then you do 3 every single
And you're just
time,
throwing
and you're just
sauces.
literally throwing away like 30 cents with every meal.
And that adds up. Yeah, customers are always harping on that. You saw that, like, in the windows of drive-thrus, it'll say we charge for extra sauces.
Yep.
And people get so mad about that. And what you don't understand is that this is product the company has to pay for.
Exactly.
Now, a lot of product for McDonald's is actually made on premises for McDonald's. I don't know if you're aware of that. Majority of the percentile is all through their own farm and productions. So they don't have to pay, somewhere in Guam or wherever to ship over product for themselves or whatnot. However, it still adds up. So when I was working for McDonald's, we had an entire case of fries. And this is a little heftier than ketchup packets. But an entire case of fries was left out of the walk-in freezer.
Oh, no.
Yes. And no one had noticed it because it was also during the rush hour. So by the time the rush hour was over and ours lasted 3 hours, we could not use that, and it had to be counted as waste. That's kind of heavy.
Mm-hmm.
When a customer asks for extra sweet and sour sauce, now, mind you, I haven't worked there for 10 years, but it's ingrained.
Yeah.
When a customer would ask for extra sweet and sour sauce, I would let them know, like, okay, that's gonna cost extra. I can ring you up for that sauce real quick because you've already paid out your stuff. And they would get so upset. And I'm not gonna sit there and educate them for however many hours.
Yeah.
I would just let them know it is company policy. They would complain. They would ask to see a manager. Then they would have to talk to me anyway because I am the manager. And then they would ask to speak to someone higher, and I would have to direct them to our franchise line. It costs. In the same way that you get upset, not you necessarily, anyone listening at home, the same way you would get upset at your kid leaving the light on is the same way that a business owner would get when a multitude of money is being wasted on product that's either getting given out or wasted because it was made incorrectly, left out to rot or whatever. It's the same mindset.
Yeah.
It is wasted money.
Absolutely. It's a penny's business. You got to count those pennies.
Absolutely.
All right. Now we're going to touch base on the Chris Nevins podcast, assistant restaurant leader for Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, with 700 locations in 37 states, earning $1.5 billion annually. That's billion with a B.
That was the football coach, right?
Yeah. He did
Yeah.
a lot of a sports coach.
References.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, he was a coach in a lot of different sports teams and stuff, and then moved into restaurant leadership.
Yeah.
Bringing a lot of his own experience into that style.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that he brought up was training. And it was one of the things that I thought that was most unique, because a lot of the training styles was his personal takeaway, but the thing that I want to touch on right now is actually Raising Cane's, not franchise, independent owner, Raising Cane's now, is their training method. So specifically what they do is they'll have someone come in and then they'll learn one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they learn everything about that one station. So let's say they're doing fries. They only do fries.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only thing they learn. And then not until they completely master it and then want to learn something else will they move on from that one station to do something else.
Mm-hmm. That's actually pretty common in most. That's the same thing at McDonald's. You're supposed to start on fries. SOPs when you're doing the training, and like when I did my manager training, I didn't know this because this is not how I started. My management did not follow SOP.
Mm-hmm.
But when I became management, you learn your new employees, depending on what department, air quotes, they start in, are supposed to start on fries. Now, mine was different because when I started at the peak of summer. So we were right next to like a lot of schools that they had a lot of sports programs going on. So I started on back cash. That's the back register. That's the one you first get to after you make your order in the drive-thru. It was not, in my opinion, it was not a good starting place for a new employee, but at the same time it was if you had to hit the ground running. And that's, once you learn that system, you almost learn the ins and outs of the restaurant, because you by learning the system, you also know what's going into every sandwich. A lot of people argue and say, no, if you're on the table, that's the best. No, because then you don't know the electronic system. Whereas after I learned back cash, I hopped on table because I knew how to make everything just by looking at it in the system on a daily basis. And that's where I was stuck in back cash for a year. And I hated it because when you're back there, you're in a small little space, right? And I'll get to the point real quick, but you're in a small little space. But the reason why you hate it so much is because you don't get to learn the other areas right away, because back cash has the lesser amount of staffing, which is why you get stuck there for so long. And it's harder to get out because nobody wants to learn back cash. So you have to train any new employee coming in. You're like, hey there, friend. Want to learn back cash? No, that's too bad. You're going to learn back cash today. However, starting somewhere, following the SOP, starting on fries, that's normal. When you master fries, there's actually like a title for it. I don't remember what it was called. It was like Fry Master or something. I don't know. It was goofy.
No, that's funny though, because he said something very similar.
It was like the golden arches. Like I couldn't remember. You're like, that's what the golden arches represent. You know, right? They're fries. Yeah, but yeah, you're supposed to start on fries and then you move. There's essentially stepping stones, and you're supposed to follow that. That's what creates a successful team member.
Yeah.
And when you don't, you actually tend to have a lot of turnover because of it. So if you don't start somewhere with a concrete foundation as a team member, you tend to just quit.
Yeah.
And that's pretty commonly seen in the food industry, especially the fast food industry.
I gotcha. I mean, there's definitely a lot of moving parts. Like for you to know absolutely everything about the kitchen, like that's a lot. Like there's all the ingredients, all the recipes, all the food itself. And then the specific processes of like, what paper do I use to wrap this up? What plating do I use? What cup size? Like, and
you have to go in order when you're putting these two sandwiches together.
Yeah. Everything is like super, super specific to the very T, and that's the SOPs.
You know what's a good example? SpongeBob. I know that sounds silly.
Yeah, when you bring up the sandwich,
when he puts together the Krabby Patty, especially the no, I think it was like the no pickles episode with the big guy.
It was under his tongue the whole time.
It was under his tongue the whole time, with the old and the new. But when SpongeBob has his mental breakdown and he's like, bun, patty, ketchup, and he's like going through the steps by memory, that's how you have to do it at McDonald's. And at the time when I was there, we didn't have placard cards that like showed you everything. You learned it and it was ingrained. So that's something like you went home and you had dreams about because you just knew how to make everything.
Yeah.
Now I think they have like hanging placard cards or whatever, but
That's how Domino's is. Domino's has like those that it's like on the wall. So right where you're cooking, like it has the pictures put up, and so you can reference every single time.
yeah. But then it there you get some that like they rely on it and they slow you down. Like I
For
need
sure.
you to hurry up.
For sure, yeah. I definitely remember like when you're training someone new, it's definitely beneficial. But then it does kind of become a larger issue.
Yeah.
That's one interesting thing though, is that Domino's didn't really have that. I implemented it when I was the GM there. Like I would have someone only learn one thing first, and then they would get good at one thing, and that's all they would do, and then eventually move on to the next part. But other than that, like there was never an SOP that I was aware of, at least, as far as where someone was supposed to start.
Yeah.
So
And
for you to-
everyone's different. Because you remember you
Yeah.
started me as a driver, and I think like the second or third night in, I was making pizzas. So
Yep.
still driving, but I was also making pizzas. But I'm also a fast learner.
Yeah.
And things tend to ingrain. Whereas another female who had started at the same time, this is the one that, she beelined everything, if you can recall. It took her forever to learn how to do a regular pizza, like a regular cheese pizza, and then she was still doing it wrong. I'm like, come on, we started at the same time. Like, you gotta move faster.
Yeah.
Or the gentleman who did, I think you call them ovens as it comes out.
Yeah.
You do the
ovens.
chopping, like that's all he did. But
Cut table in the ovens. Yep.
there are just some people like that, and technically that's okay. I try to push to be an all-arounder.
Yeah.
Because when you're an all-arounder, you can pick up more shifts. Like if you're that type of person that's like, hey, I can do any type of shift. I need more hours. Then you need to be an all-arounder. Or, it's just knowing that I have that certain someone to be dependable on. I love that.
Yeah.
Because then they end up they become the superstar. They're the management type of quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you see that they're that stud.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah, so, practice one thing whenever you have a new hire, have them train on one specific aspect until mastery before you throw them into something else. And with that, you can always be confident that they know exactly what they're doing the whole time.
Yeah,
So
don't throw them into hellfire. That's just wrong.
Well, I mean, that's in the restaurant industry, that's all it is pretty much. It's always every day is an emergency. All right. Another big thing that he brought up that I found really, really interesting was that he's always recruiting. So Raising Cane's has a specific idea that they are just always recruiting. Every single day, it does not matter. They have open interviews. He will always be reviewing the open job boards that they have online, things like that. And he'll do interviews even when there's not an open position. So I'm sure that I'm going to hear multiple sides of this.
Yes.
On one side,
you could see my face.
I
I'm
can see
already
your
like, I don't
face.
like this.
On one side, I can definitely see that mindset of like, this is not good for the candidate. This isn't good for the person that's actually applying because they think that they have an opportunity for a job. But how fast people, like, how high the turnover is when it comes to restaurants. People are leaving every other day. So being able to do that quick fill, I see it as a huge positive. Always recruiting in the restaurant industry, specifically, not traditional business industry because the turnover usually isn't as high, but the restaurant industry with such a high turnover, I think that is a great idea. All right, Becca, let's hear it. Let's hear
Okay. I'm gonna try and not be so negative.
Nah, go for it. Go for the throat.
I'm letting you know right now I'm gonna be negative. I'm
All
gonna
right.
try not to be so negative.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because you're very optimistic about it. You're like, oh, I can see the benefits. Well, I see the negatives of it.
Okay.
Looking at it as an applicant side, that is false hope. So I'll give you an example. Lowe's has a permanent sticker on all of their entrances that says now hiring. No, we're not. Especially at my location. No, we're not. We don't have any positions open. And the thing is that it's false hope for someone who really either wants it or needs it. And they're like, oh my gosh, they're hiring. This is my chance. And then come to find out, no, we're not. or you can sit on the back burner with some other places. That, in my opinion, is an inconsideration for the applicant, for the potential, not clients, but the potential, I don't know what the word is.
A candidate?
Candidate, thank you. I know it started with a C. But yeah, I can definitely see that as a problem. I have seen it be a problem with certain people that walk in to places that it says it's hiring, and then you see the color drain from their face sometimes because they're told we're not actually hiring. That's just a sign that's always there. They get upset. They lose hope, and it's like you're not setting them up for success. Why put that out there? And if you're going to be, excuse me, if you're going to be just recruiting just to say you're recruiting, then say that. Like, they can just put their hat into monster.com and call it a day.
Hmm.
Put like a waiting pool or something like that. But I disagree with that method heavily.
Okay.
You shouldn't be putting up that you're hiring unless you're actually hiring. And like right now, you know that I'm preparing for a big opportunity that I may or may not get, that also sees thousands, because this is a head honcho company.
Mm-hmm.
But this place sees thousands of applicants, and they have thousands of interviews, but they don't put up hiring boards unless they are hiring, which I appreciate. They're also one of the companies that will let you know that if they accept you or not. They actually let you know. But yeah, I heavily disagree
I got you.
with that method.
I definitely think that the reason is important. So one actually big issue right now that companies are dealing with is that if a company shows that they're hiring, they get like a tax break. So that
It's a scam.
So that is actually a current big issue going on in the HR world right now. And it's really just that. It's that like companies are essentially lying about hiring.
Yeah.
I don't know. I see traditional business and restaurant industry, they have tons of similarities and they have certain differences. And I think one of the big differences is that the restaurant community truly does have a huge hiring problem. Like,
Yeah.
recruiting is very, very difficult
agree
right
with that.
now. And unless you're willing to have a third party member do it for you, you have to spend time doing it. Also, you want to focus on the quality of the candidate. So if I need an employee because I just lost someone today and they didn't give me a 2-week notice, I just lost 1 to 3 team members today alone. One went to college, the other one got another job, and the other one just quit because it was too hard for him. I'm down 3 people and I have 0 people in my pipeline, like 0 candidates.
That sucks. But I'm not going to say that's a you problem because it really does suck. But this whole just let me just fish around, but I'm not going to actually catch anything. I still don't agree with it.
Well, but you are creating a pipeline, though.
No, because you have Indeed, you have LinkedIn, Monster, and like all this other stuff that I can't remember, careers, and you have all these opportunities that you can just go and put a board out, or even reach out, because people will upload their profiles, their resumes, so that way recruiters can actively see them.
Yes, for sure. With traditional businesses in a title that people actually want to have, maybe. But that is not the case for a position like a porter or a position like a lower paying security guard or a position
no one wants
like
those jobs.
Well, that's
No
the
one can
thing is that
afford those
because
jobs.
that's fine, but then companies have to use different tactics because they're still a business. They have to run, they have to succeed. You know, like you're running a business and you not own, but like you manage hundreds of people, thousands of people sometimes, depending on the company. If you can't like hire the people and have them in the spots so that way you can then make money, you will shut down and all those people are out of the job.
Still a bad idea.
All right. Well, it's okay. We disagree. And I think that it's a nice viewpoint because I view it as a CEO. I view it as like an HR representative. And I think you view it specifically as like the candidate. Like
Mhm.
I think that the way that we view
Well,
that.
even when I was in management, I would never do something like that.
So then would you be okay? Like if you had no staff and you were by yourself, you're happy that
That's
that
a
was
bit
the best way to do
extreme
it?
because we very well know that a majority of these chains are not without staff.
I mean, but like
And I
they
have
are
been by
low though.
myself. Like I have
Yeah.
worked
And it sucks,
by
right?
myself. Yeah, sure it
So you
sucks.
would prefer
But
to
it
have a
is what it is.
pipeline.
Like I would not have people just waiting in a dream pool. By the way, side mark right there.
Mhm.
Side comment, I should say. Um like as a customer and an employee, I think that retail is hurting more than the food industry right now.
Interesting.
Right? Like as I'm working in retail, we barely have one person per department. There's actually like management has been having to cover at least four departments because we don't have people. Like we have people on paper, but we don't have them on the shift. And it's because of certain people making very poor decisions as customers when they're shopping. That's hurting the business. So because it's hurting the business, we can't afford labor. So we have people on paper, we
Are
can't
you saying
schedule them.
stealing?
Yeah, they're stealing, but
Okay.
like
I was like, 'cause I don't understand. Like that was too vague for me to understand what you're talking.
yeah,
Okay, so there's theft.
theft is at a ridiculous
Got it.
high right now.
Okay.
And because of that, people can't work.
Hmm.
It's so sad. It's so sad because it's like you have a lot of customers that will complain that there's no one there to help them, but they don't realize that they're not there because they can't be scheduled because the company can't afford to schedule and pay them
Yeah.
while people are stealing high-end items.
Mm,
So we're hurting bad because of it.
I gotcha. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a
Yeah,
big topic.
but they can afford to go get some meals at a drive-through. So I don't know.
All right, I feel the sass. I respect it. I respect it.
It's more of hurt than sass.
Ah, very
It's
well.
more of
All right. And then another part that Chris brought up was meeting the team where they're at and then helping them there. And I think that is maybe more unique to him, not necessarily a Raising Cane's thing, but it was a topic that I found really interesting. And when it comes to that, are you speaking to a high schooler and this is their first job? Because you have to talk to that person differently from the mom who is using this as a part-time job to supplement some
oh yeah.
income while helping out. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
also different from the college student who's doing this because they need some money while they're in college and they know that this is only going to be like a
Yeah.
2-year thing, maybe a 6-month thing.
Yep.
So I think that dynamic alone is
Mhm.
really, really unique because in most traditional businesses, there is a long-term career path, and that long-term career path, which may not be for everyone, it may not be what everyone is interested in, so you do have turnover, but there's at least a path where someone can get into a position where they feel like they've achieved something in life.
Yeah.
And in the restaurant industry, it's a little bit more difficult because if you don't specifically like the restaurant industry, then you may not feel that same like success.
And you don't feel an obligation to stay.
Yeah.
Like there's no encouragement. So but just like how you mentioned with the the what is it called? Like they're essentially all different hats. Like they all have different reasons to be there.
Yes.
So you said that the mom that might have to have it as a part-time job, the student. Um, I'm seeing a lot of elderly having to get part-time jobs because their social securities are just not cutting it.
Yep.
Yeah, they're hurting as well.
That's tough.
We have people who are working because they don't get health insurance at their other jobs, or new homeowners who might need to be working at like a store where they can get discounts on making their repairs at home or something. Like the reason why I'm spotlighting this or focusing on it, I should say, is because many people think that everyone is in it for the money, um, but have no idea what some of like their ultimate goals are. I have seen some immigrants that will get U.S. W-2 jobs because they need to make sure they have some sort of security to stay in the country,
Mm.
and obviously keeping the record clean and whatnot. But they will pick up, crummy W-2 jobs just to make sure that they can stay here in some sort of safety. And um, I think a lot of us take it for granted a little bit, and we assume that everyone's just the money grabber, or just because they want some extra coin, but have no idea what it's going for towards. And it's just a different outlook. That's all.
Yeah.
So we got to realize that everyone's here for a reason, and whatever the reason is, we have to create an environment that they want to be in. Because if they don't want to be in, they don't have to be there. They can find somewhere else. Some they may need to be there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and they'll put up with whatever strenuous activities are going on in the workplace. But as business owners, we need to stop neglecting our people.
Mm.
And I know that they say the customer always comes first, but then you're neglecting your own employees.
I gotcha. Yeah, I definitely think there's a fine line between they're coming into your culture. So I like this is the part where I view the business's viewpoint as well as the employee's viewpoint. Because one thing is that you're coming into their culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
the company should ideally have a culture of whatever they want to boost, whatever compensation structure they have, however they have it made. Like that is their culture, the way they hold their team accountable. And then all new hires are going into that culture. A new hire should never change the culture of the company because that's just weakness in the company itself. The difference though is that, well, okay, so Becca just made a face. Think of it this way.
Well, the reason
You
why I made
have
a face is because if the culture is horrible culture,
Well, yeah, so that's the thing is that that's only if you are already keeping the team members in mind, like you're already doing the things. Like
yeah,
if you have employee relations, a solid compensation structure, like if you already have all these things and then someone shows up who is completely not within like
if they're changing
your
it for the better,
well, but that's very subjective
it
because what
depends on
might
the
be better
culture.
for one person is not going to be better for everyone.
Yeah,
So it's really, really important that you develop a culture for your organization that you as the owner are happy with, but then keeping in mind other people's perspectives and then making that decision. Do I want to change for them or not? And I think that actually comes in really interestingly right now with these conversations with, you know, the newer generations being softer and people having wildly different viewpoints on the far left and the far right. Like there's a lot of controversy right now in a lot of different areas. But at the end of the day, just meet the person where they're at. And this is something that has to be decided during the recruiting portion because you have to think like, can they fit into our culture? Will they be a benefit to the team as a whole? And if not, then they're not the right person. Just because you need
yeah.
someone does not mean that you should accept anyone.
And the recruiting portion is not perfect.
Yeah.
Like some people get through that they shouldn't, and some people don't get through that they really should.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
like it's not like you can know. You just have to pick up on the signs.
Yeah.
And not all signs are visible. So it's a lot of people will argue that, and they're like, "Well, why didn't you or didn't you?" I'm like, no, no. Sometimes it's just not there.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe you can have a stud that doesn't get into the recruiting because they could have been anxious. Maybe they're super nervous during the recruiting phase and they didn't get in because they just didn't shine when they needed to.
Yeah.
Or maybe you had someone who had faulty polish. They got in and they were a horrible person on the team,
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just something to think about. Like everybody makes these assumptions about the recruiting process and they have no idea the struggles that go in. Everyone has the struggles.
Mhm.
It's just Just focusing on recruiting right now.
No worries. But yeah, and actually Chris brought up some really good points as far as his recruiting tactics. One of which is like asking completely random questions like, do you like anime for like a high school kid, or what do you do for your hobbies?
It was to throw them off guard.
Well, yeah, it was really to get them more comfortable, because if they talk about something that they're interested in, they open up a lot more, and you get at least a little bit of a deeper viewpoint of who they are as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that that's by itself super important. Like, when you are recruiting someone, you have to think about your culture, but then you also have to think about meeting them where they're at, which, like I said, Chris did an excellent job of discussing that. His podcast was really, really interesting as far as using his coaching skills, his clearly very personable person. I love the idea of the crap sandwich that he brought up.
The crap sandwich.
So if you don't know about the crap sandwich, check out the podcast.
That's the podcast with Chris Nevins.
Yep. And I think it's just really, really interesting stuff that we've had the opportunity to go over. So, two awesome organizations. Penn Station East Coast Subs, once again, 320 locations, doing a fantastic job of franchising. And then Chris Nevins, the Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, 700 locations, independent ownership that actually went from a franchising organization to buying back their organization. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to those two gentlemen. Maybe we'll have them again on the podcast.
Who knows?
So if you stuck with us this long, I truly appreciate it. If you like the content, please rate the show. And if you're feeling a little crazy, maybe share it with someone.